Dr. Matthew Nagra, welcome to the Urban Pharmacy Podcast. I am super excited to have you here. Thank you for being present with me right now.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
All right, so I wanted to start this conversation with an icebreaker. I want to know right now, it is May 2021 when we're recording this. What is your current favorite food, my friend?
So my whole life, I guess I could say it's been like spaghetti for the most part, pasta. Um, Also, sometimes I just say it's mangoes. They're my favorite fruit, but sometimes I'd call them my favorite food, period. But the one right now that I'm really having super often and really liking is soy curls, actually, which not everybody has tried, but they're amazing in my
I
opinion.
saw that on your stories and I'm like, he's kind of making me want to buy
Yeah.
them. Okay. So got to try those out. Have you ever had Mamie Sapote?
Oh
Mamey.
yeah, I have. So I went to, I traveled all around in 2018 around Southeast Asia. I also was in Nicaragua in like 2015 or something like that. And I had mame sapote in one of those places. I can't remember which one. I remember I really liked it. The other one, when I was in Nicaragua, I was having sapadilla a lot,
Oh
which is
my word.
similar. And one of I was on a work sort of or a volunteer medical trip there, or volunteering in a clinic, and one of my friends who was staying in one of the houses of the residents, they actually had a sapadilla tree in their yard, so I would have to sneak over there every now and then.
It is in the same family.
Yeah,
Sapadilla. Oh my word. It's like eating brown sugar, balls of brown sugar. I buy
yeah,
it from stupid Miami Fruit. I'm here in Indiana and I have it delivered to me
yeah.
from Miami. But okay, if you can get your hands on Canistel, I highly suggest you do that too, because I mean, if you like mango, you're gonna like this yellow fruit. It's in the
I've had it.
family.
I
You've had
think
it?
I've had that too. Yeah, it's like the egg fruit
Yeah,
stuff.
it's
Is
also
it?
known as
Yeah,
egg fruit.
yeah,
Oh,
I've had that.
so good. Okay, all right. So soy curls and mango and spaghetti all
Yeah.
sounds really awesome. Okay, yum. All right, so let's talk about you a little bit more. What got you into naturopathy,
So when I
naturopathic medicine?
Yeah, so when I was younger, I had several health issues. I had asthma, allergies, I was overweight. I was also an athlete, so definitely as far as weight and physical performance goes, that was important to me. And I actually had a personal trainer back when I was 15, and he really pushed sort of a plant-based nutrition kind of approach, not like 100% plant-based or anything, but definitely mostly plant-based. And after some pushback and not wanting to really follow the advice, eventually I decided to give it a shot. And just pretty rapidly, I noticed improvements in myself as far as my breathing for things like asthma, my allergies, my weight started coming off, my skin cleared up. And so I kind of noted that, well, nutrition plays a role here, or may play a role here. And after that, I just wanted to learn as much as I could about how nutrition can affect our health. And once I get into university and everything, I went to 100% plant-based. I continued to learn more, and I wanted to do something in a field where I can help others do the same. And I flirted with conventional medicine. I looked at other routes. I actually looked at becoming a personal trainer, at least thought of it at one point as well. And it was after I'd shadowed a couple naturopathic doctors, like basically sat in office for some visits and that, that I really got on board. I like the practice style, the really long visits, 45 minutes, hour long visits. You can really dive into the patient's history and figure out what's going on. You could also prescribe medication, so it's not like you're handcuffed to only using these sort of alternative modalities. You can definitely use conventional medical therapies, which are often indicated. And at the same time, I could focus a lot on the diet lifestyle factor as well. And so that's kind of what led me into wanting to go that route.
That's awesome. That's pretty cool that your, personal trainer or your
Yeah.
like kind of influenced you so much. It's really cool because when I'm working with my brand coach, I actually did a whole storyboard of like thinking back at the biggest influencers in my life, and they radically shifted the way that I
Mm.
live now. And it's just really cool. So that's really awesome. Okay, so when we are talking about people that you're working with, what do you think is the easiest thing? Because I know that you're addressing lifestyle. I mean, lifestyle medicine is what you're practicing. But what do you think is the easiest thing for patients to adapt or adopt in terms of when they transition to eating more plants? And what are your tips on dietary adherence for those who want to eat more healthfully long term?
There are two big things I look at. For one, I like to start, again, it depends on the person. There's always going to be variability, but I like to start with just one meal at a time. So we'll start with breakfast. I'll even write out with them a few options for breakfast. I'll try to find out, what do you currently eat for breakfast? How can we modify that? If it's scrambled eggs, we'll switch it to a tofu scramble. We might make some, healthy toast options, some oatmeal, come up with a few recipes that they might enjoy. They go home, they try them, they rotate through. I might give them some other recipe resources as well. A couple weeks later, or a few weeks later, we'll follow up and we'll see, okay, how's that going? Are you able to implement these? Are you having any troubles? Do we need to change anything? But if they've nailed that, right? If the breakfast is taken care of and it's pretty much second nature at this point, they don't have any trouble. Then we move on to lunch. We do the same thing. Then we'll move on to dinner. We'll do the same thing. Then we'll move on to snacks, or in whatever order kind of suits the patient. That I think is a good way to help maintain it, because it doesn't seem like this huge overhaul you're doing all at once. It is more of a slow transition. On top of that, I like to look at those easy swaps. So if, like I already mentioned, if you're having scrambled eggs, you swap it for a tofu scramble. If you're used to having, I don't know, spaghetti with meat sauce, you change it to a spaghetti with tomato sauce, or you could even, throw some ground tofu or something in there if you want that bit more of a meaty texture. I will go through their diet like that and really try to see where can we have you eat relatively the same to what you're eating now, so you don't have to go through this huge learning curve of different cooking techniques and everything, but just modify them to be healthier and more plant-centric.
Yeah, I like that. I like the starting with the first meal of the day. And a lot of the breakfast foods are pretty easy to make ahead. So you could not be overwhelmed in the morning, such as like oatmeal and stuff like that. You can kind of get all of those ingredients prepped ahead of time.
Mhm.
I like that. So, okay, good tips. Do you think that do you think it's more feasible for people to stick to plant-based dietary transitions versus other, perhaps what you might view, what I definitely view as bad diets?
I think it depends on a few things. So there's actually a really good study that came out last year looking at diet adherence amongst different diet groups. And they compared weight loss dieters to gluten-free dieters to paleo dieters to vegetarian dieters and vegan dieters. Of course, the vegetarian and vegans weren't necessarily just eating that way for diet. There were ethical concerns. And they actually found that the vegans had the easiest time and had the least roadblocks to adherence. Vegetarians were second. And actually, the weight loss dieters did the worst. And then gluten-free and paleo were kind of middle of the road. And the reason for that is because it became about more than a diet for the vegans, right? It's a part of who they were. It became a part of their social identity. And there were some really great quotes. I can't remember them off the top of my head, but in that paper where some of the participants were saying things like, well, when you know what it actually is, it's so easy to, stick with the, eating plants and that. So I think from that perspective, if it's ethically or even environmentally motivated, I think it is easier to stick to a vegan diet. Now, if you're talking about if you're transitioning for health reasons, I wouldn't say it's necessarily better or worse or easier or harder than a lot of other diets. We do have direct comparisons in trials comparing a low-fat vegan diet to or whole foods plant-based diets to a low carb approach, say the American Diabetes Association diet, and the adherence is pretty much the same across the board. We have, again, vegan diets compared to Mediterranean more recently, and again, adherence was fairly similar. If anything, if I recall correctly, the vegans were a little bit better there too. And so we do see that it's at least as easy as adopting other diets. The thing is, though, diets are hard, right? Following a diet is just tough. following that long term is always going to be challenging. And that's why having that, knowing your why and having that reason for making the change is so huge. But if it is strictly for health reasons, then it's tough regardless. But at the same time, if you are adopting a healthy diet that is going to help you get the results that you want, if you start seeing those results, whether it is weight loss or improvements in blood sugar, what have you, I do think you're probably more likely to want to stick with those patterns.
For sure. I've definitely found that working with clients, it doesn't really matter if the health aspect is not there. And that's actually why I spend so much time working on the why and the mindset behind their behavioral changes, because and I think diet is one of the hardest things to change. It's just it's so difficult. And I love that. Yeah, I do very much agree with, there's so many reasons when it comes to eating vegan or eating plant-based that are just like, well, if you don't care about health, well, what about the planet? Like it's really great. There's other reasons why this is a really great way to live and to eat. So speaking, you mentioned low fat, whole food, plant-based. With the physicians committee, I teach people about the power plate and fruits, veggies, legumes, and whole grains. And do you think personally that nuts and seeds should be added to that?
Oh yeah, definitely. I thought you were going to ask if nuts and seeds should be eliminated, so I shook my head. No, I do think nuts and seeds should be added. I think when it comes to cardiovascular risk, nothing performs better than nuts or seeds. As far as the data that we have, I think for blood pressure, again, lots of plant foods are excellent for that. Nuts and seeds do seem to come out either at the top or pretty close to the top. For triglycerides, again, they're the best. For replacing saturated fat with the polyunsaturated fats from nuts and seeds, again, they perform the best. I do think it's something that we need to emphasize more in the sort of plant-based space. Even with a lot of the talk about oils, I think for most, for especially healthy people, there's no concern around having like olive oil or extra virgin olive oil, for example. But where it can become a problem is more for caloric density, for especially if weight management is an issue for someone or something that they're working on. Then yeah, it can be beneficial to limit the oils in those cases. But from a overall health standpoint, in otherwise healthy individuals, I just don't see it as a huge concern either.
Yeah, I think that's the difference between like McDougall and Esselstyn and Barnard. Like their approach is very low seeds and nuts and like no oil, but that's like for disease reversal versus like Furman or, and Greger that are saying absolutely eat the nuts and seeds. I think that's the difference between like what they're teaching.
I think so. I mean, when you look at cardiovascular disease or diabetes or whatever it is, I mean, weight loss alone is huge for improvements in risk or improvement in lipid profiles or blood sugar regulation. Definitely, that's huge. So limiting oils in that respect can be good. But again, when it comes to like, do nuts and seeds actually lead to weight gain? Actually, the data doesn't support the idea that it does. I do think that it is possible that adding nuts and seeds to these sorts of like whole foods, plant-based diets that we have all this data on so far could actually lead to an even better overall outcome. It's just we don't really have trials directly pitting them quite yet.
Mm-hmm. It's such an interesting thing to hear about. I like Dr. Furman's teachings about the nuts and seeds and all the important phytonutrients we can get from them. Okay, what issues do you see in terms of chronic illness with your patients the most? Is it standard things that we're seeing that we're talking about right now, like being overweight or obese, just high blood pressure, like high blood lipids? What do you see the most? I know you're in Canada, I'm here in the United States, but like, is it all of these precursors that lead to cardiovascular disease that you're seeing the most, or what is it?
So I would say it's kind of all of the above. I do have some patients with high blood pressure that we're working on. I do have actually quite a few patients with high cholesterol. I do deal with that a lot. But then I actually have some patients with pre-existing cardiovascular disease. So like pre-existing coronary artery disease, if they've had like a heart attack in the past or something like that. So I do deal with some of those patients. And then standard stuff like some gut health, some weight loss, a mix of different reasons for coming in, but definitely cardiovascular disease is probably at the top, or at least risk factors for cardiovascular disease.
Yeah. Okay. And so you mentioned cholesterol. Let's talk a little bit about that. What is your first approach to helping patients with cholesterol issues?
So there's two things. For starters, just to clarify for those listening, when we talk about cholesterol, the marker that I'm most concerned about in most cases, there are some exceptions, is LDL cholesterol. So LDL are the low density lipoproteins. They carry cholesterol through your bloodstream, but they're also those lipoproteins that can end up in the artery wall and lead to atherosclerosis and that. So that's what we want to keep really low. Now, when I do have patients with high LDL cholesterol levels, I want to first look at, obviously, what are you eating? We'll take a look at that, and then we'll try to remove or limit the foods that are known to raise cholesterol or raise LDL cholesterol. These are things like meat, dairy, or high-fat dairy in particular, eggs, coconut oil, palm oil, even refined sugar to some degree. So we want to look at those sorts of foods and try to limit them. If that isn't enough right there to drive their numbers down, or if their numbers are really, really high to begin with, we want to go further than that. We want to add in foods that actually lower, like actively lower your, again, LDL cholesterol. These are things like oats, for example. The oat beta glucans, the fibers in there can help lower cholesterol. We have, again, that sort of viscous fiber on things like okra or eggplant, that slimy texture that you get when you cook those. That, again, can help lower cholesterol. You've got your fruits, your nuts and seeds, as I've already mentioned. Soy is fantastic for that, as are other plant proteins. We'll go through the individual foods that way, and it's kind of known as the portfolio diet, actually, or portfolio dietary pattern by David Jenkins, another Canadian. So we'll go through, what can they add in on top of removing some of those cholesterol raising foods to try to optimize their levels.
Basically fiber.
I mean, fiber is huge. Yeah.
More plants, more fiber, hopefully lowering that cholesterol. Okay. So this is a definitely different topic, but bone broth.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that?
So actually, I haven't looked in the last few months, but a little while back, I went through the research on bone broth. I looked up on PubMed the search terms bone broth as well as bone soup, and there were like, I think 14 papers total in all the literature on them. And not one of them was actually really looking at human outcomes at all. There were some animal studies. There were some case studies on individual humans, and they weren't good. They were like excessive vomiting and all sorts of stuff, toxicity. There's some studies on the lead content of particularly chicken bone broth. Again, higher levels there, or levels that might be a bit higher than we want. Some will try to debate that, but again, it's just unnecessary. And then overall nutrition, I mean, it's not great. There's nothing you can't get anywhere else. And that would come packaged with a lot of other good stuff like fibers and whatnot. So I see no reason to start eating bone broth. I don't see any evidence for benefits of bone broth, especially the benefits that are claimed around things like skin health, hair health, bone health, and joint health. There's just no evidence for it, period. And so I think the story should really end there. But there's actually, like I said, some case studies suggesting potential harm as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So yeah, I feel like I've heard about heavy metal issues with different protein powders and with potentially with bone broth. When you're treating patients and when you're talking to them, are you addressing, I mean, heavy metals are an environmental toxic, basically. Are you addressing and talking to them about that in terms of their care as well, like what they're putting on their body and what's in their home, etc.? Are you talking?
So, I mean, obviously, if they're in a home with something like asbestos, which isn't a heavy metal, but like some sort of environmental toxins that we know are really harmful, obviously, we want to try to. I mean, you can't really change your home immediately or anything, but it's something to be aware of. When it comes to concerns around like heavy metal toxicity and things like that, like you're mentioning, it's not my first, target. It's not the first thing I'm going to be jumping to. Some patients do come in and ask about that, and then I'll share what I know about it. But it's definitely not top of my list, because in most cases, we're not going to be exposed to the sorts of levels that are really going to cause problems. But obviously, like you said, it can accumulate. There can be, variety of environmental factors that are playing a role, for sure.
Okay, so let's talk about eggs and carnitine, TMAO. Can you just tell our listeners all about all of that?
Yeah. So eggs are one of the foods that have gotten the best reputation, but I think are actually amongst the more harmful foods we can consume. This reputation for eggs, I think, largely comes from this idea that they're really nutritious, that they provide a ton of nutrition. Now, I actually made a video with Live Kindly on this not long ago, really looking at the nutrition, and it's not all that impressive. We're looking at about 200 milligrams of cholesterol per egg, about 1.5 grams saturated fat per egg. We're looking at about 6 grams of protein per egg. For comparison's sake, a similar size serving of tofu would provide 8 grams, so you'd actually get more. Now, eggs do contain some B vitamins, I'll give it that, but very low mineral content. I really don't know where this idea that they're nutritious comes from. Actually, the other ones are lutein and zeaxanthin. These are carotenoids important for eye health. And the egg industry loves to talk about them, but the fact of the matter is, you can have a very small serving of some dark leafy greens, and you would get orders of magnitude more from there. Like, I can't remember the exact calculation, but it's just absurd how different the levels are there. So I just don't see any kind of huge merit to something like egg consumption. Now, as far as disease risk goes, if you look at dietary cholesterol, which is the cholesterol that you eat in something like an egg, it can raise our serum cholesterol levels, our LDL cholesterol levels, and can increase cardiovascular disease risk. But that seems to happen most in people who don't eat much cholesterol to begin with. So if you're already eating a lot of cholesterol and you add more cholesterol on top of that, your serum cholesterol, your LDL cholesterol, is not going to go up very much at all. So if you take average American population and they're already eating a ton of cholesterol, you add more on top of that, their risk doesn't really change, at least not that much. Now, if you took a vegan or someone who's largely plant-based and you got them to eat an egg or two a day, their levels are going to shoot up. And so that's going to become more of a problem. And we do have data on varying levels of egg consumption, and where we consistently seem to see risk increase for things like cardiovascular disease is definitely once you're up to 1 egg a day. Once you're up to eating 1 egg a day, your risk is definitely higher than those eating, say, less than 1 a week. Even at about half an egg a day, you can see risk increase if the studies are large enough, they're really well conducted. You can pick up risk that way as well. But most importantly is the data that we see from what are called substitution analyses. So what these are, this is looking at what happens when you substitute eggs in your diet with something else. Now, if you substitute eggs with something like processed meat, risk isn't really going to change all that much. I mean, they're both pretty bad for you. When you replace eggs with, say, nuts, as I've talked about earlier, risk drops dramatically. So, nutrition is always about replacement. It's always about what are you eating instead of that other thing. And so if you're eating nuts and seeds instead of the eggs, or if you're eating, legumes or whole grains instead of the eggs, you're going to very likely see benefit there. And so that's just kind of the take-home message. Now, you did mention carnitine. I think you meant choline.
I didn't mean choline, actually. I meant carnitine because I want to talk about choline and carnitine and TMAO. Yeah. Okay.
So eggs are one of the nutrients that they're touted for is choline, and they are actually quite high in choline. Choline is an essential nutrient. It actually more recently became an essential nutrient because we do make some, but apparently we don't make enough, and so you need to get a little bit through your diet. Of course, there are plant-based sources. Soy is a great source, for example. Chickpeas are decent sources. Quinoa, broccoli, Brussels sprouts. So we do have plant-based sources. But eggs are like a powerhouse source, really, as far as the amount of choline it has. However, that might not be a good thing. We might not want too much choline. Choline, genetically elevated choline levels have been shown to increase type 2 diabetes risk, and egg consumption is associated with type 2 diabetes risk. On top of that, we do have some study, or at least one study, comparing choline supplements to eggs, and we find that that choline supplements alone lead to about the same. It's called ApoB. It's what causes, or it's the factor in LDL particles that cause it to attach to the artery wall. But it leads to the same level of ApoB as eating the whole eggs. That sort of indicates that choline might actually raise that as well and raise cardiovascular disease risk, but we do need more research there. And then the other thing that you kind of mentioned is that choline does eventually get converted into TMAO. So we eat choline, our bacteria in our gut chew it up and produce what's called trimethylamine, or TMA. That then goes to our liver and is oxidized to form trimethylamine N oxide, or TMAO. Now, it is thought, based on some mechanistic studies in particular, that TMAO can lead to atherosclerosis. I actually don't buy that. I don't think that's the case. And that's because, again, we do have those what are called Mendelian randomization studies, which is looking at genetically elevated or reduced levels. And we do not find that genetically elevated TMAO levels actually cause atherosclerosis or cause cardiovascular disease. What I think is more likely the case here is that eating eggs or eating red meat, and red meat contains carnitine, which can also be converted into TMAO. But eating eggs or red meat are both associated with cardiovascular disease and both lead to higher TMAO levels. So there ends up being a correlation between TMAO levels and cardiovascular disease. But I don't think TMAO is the factor itself that is actually leading to disease, if that makes sense. Based on the data we have now, who knows, more stuff could come out.
It does. It's probably a lot of things. And
yeah,
which is, like why it's very hard to, it's the whole package of a plant that makes it so beneficial. And it's probably the whole package of like these, high saturated fatty foods.
I mean, yeah, for sure. Especially with like red meat, you got the saturated fat, you got the heme iron, you got the dietary cholesterol, you've got the lack of fiber. We can say that contributes. So we got all sorts of things together.
Right. Okay. Thank you. All right. So very much shifting gears. What made you want to be an entrepreneur?
Entrepreneur? Do I even consider myself one?
I mean, you work for yourself, right? Or do you work for? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so in this profession, you could partner with. I mean, now I am partner with the clinic. I'm basically renting space in a clinic. I'm working with them. So I'm not in my own private office, seeing patients that way. But the way that the profession works is either I work for another naturopathic clinic and I can be an employee and all that, or I run my own business and I run it out of another clinic or out of my own clinic. I don't have my own clinic in this case. So it was one of the primary options for me, I guess, coming out. And then just thinking about the way that I want to do things with, being plant-based, being an advocate for plant-based nutrition, wanting to have some flexibility in the way that I work. It seemed like a good route to go for myself. And I also found a clinic where the owners of the clinic happen to be vegan. Their whole family's vegan. And like, it was the funniest thing because I went to interview for them not knowing that. I didn't know that they were vegan. I just thought it seemed like a good fit. They were a clinic full of massage therapists and physiotherapists, and I definitely had a sort of sports and athletics focus, which is something I'm also interested in. And so I went to interview, and just somehow near the end of the interview, actually, it just came up that they were.
I mean, that's amazing because you do not see that very much in naturopathic medicine.
Yeah.
I mean, not here. Definitely not here in Indiana.
Yeah.
Well,
no,
I haven't found a plant, even a vegetarian naturopath.
Yeah, it's something, I mean, I constantly get in debates about. I actually spoke at our last provincial conference last October. Hopefully they invite me back to do another. But the funny thing was we were actually planning a debate. It was supposed to be a debate between myself and somebody who supports a more paleo diet. I sent over all my references and stuff ahead of time, so we can start prepping, and then he dropped out. So
Oh my God.
so it didn't end up happening. But like, I'm happy to chat with anyone. I get in these sorts of discussions all the time, but the problem is simply asking for a reference half the time ends up coming off as an attack. It's really weird. And it's not just
Yeah.
in, I'm not talking about just in this profession, but just in like online space. It's like that a lot too. Um, but yeah, I think that's a huge problem in this profession, is the idea that plant-based diets are inferior, or that you need to have animal food, animal protein in your diet. Yeah,
A lot of
it's
a lot
very
of
frustrating.
a lot of the arguments are based on anecdotes, and that's
Yeah.
frustrating. So what made you you're super, like, I know that you said that it was your personal trainer that got you into
Mhm.
plant-based, but it seems like you're almost an ethical vegan as well.
I am, yeah.
Yeah,
That came
so
later.
that came later. So it started for me with, I watched a documentary and I was like, I'm done. And then it was the earth, and now it's all about nutrition. That's like been the last 5 years. I think we've both been, I mean, I've been plant-based over a decade.
Yeah, me too.
But so it's been a whole journey, right? Like you've gone through all of the reasons. Okay. So what made you want to be so active on Instagram and like be such a voice?
So I, when I graduated 2018, I'd gone straight through school from high school to undergrad to my naturopathic studies and everything all the way through. It was 8 years of post high school studies, no breaks really, or other than summer vacation kind of thing. So I decided to take a year off. And so I went traveling that fall, winter. Just enjoyed myself. Actually, I went on a couple trips. I went through on the trip to Southeast Asia, and then I came back, and like a month or so, maybe a month and a half later, I went on the vegan cruise, the Holistic Holiday
Yeah,
at Sea.
the
I went on,
holistic at sea.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I went on that. I was just enjoying myself, and then I I just thought, okay, I'm going to start practice in a few months, just to get some, info out there. I mean, on the one hand, maybe build up my name a little bit so people know, once I do open up. But at the same time, it's just felt like sharing stuff. So I felt like sharing about nutrition and everything, and I've definitely learned a lot since I first started to. I've actually edited some of my old posts as I've learned more. Um, but I just started sharing, and then I got some people with bigger followings share my content, and then you get more people following, and then people ask questions, and then they give me ideas for more topics, and then just kind of kept going. So it's just, I don't know, it just became a thing, and now it's like a part of my life, really. I know that I'll make a big post about twice a week. I'll do stuff on my stories in between if new topics or new things come up out of the blue. Obviously, there's new studies here and there that pop up. I'll maybe do a one-off on that, and it's just part of the routine now. It's not something I think all that
Awesome.
much about, but a lot of people find me through there too. Like, I mean, yourself. For this, I'm actually recording another podcast with Simon Hill from Plant Proof in about an hour and a half. Um,
Yay! The
yeah,
new book
so
is out. That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. So he sent me mine like 3 weeks ago or something. I still haven't got
Mine
it.
mine was supposed to be here a while ago. I don't even know if it will make it
Oh,
here, to be honest.
okay. Yeah. I mean, apparently it'll be available here in Canada in about 2.5 more months, I think. But
Yeah.
I mean, ideally we would get it before then.
Yeah.
But yeah, people find me that way. A lot of patients find me through social media. It's become definitely an extension of my practice in that sense. But it's also fun. So.
Well, you're really good at it, and I want everybody to know where to find you. So we're gonna wrap it up by asking you that, and then I have one more last question that I ask all of my guests. So, where can we find you? And do you have any resources that you particularly want to point us to, or anything upcoming? Just share all the stuff.
Okay, so yeah, you can find me on Instagrams where I'm most active at Dr. Matthew Nagra. That's Dr. Matthew Nagra. You can also get me on Twitter, also Dr. Matthew Nagra. I'm becoming more active on there. I feel like I go through phases. And then I also had a Facebook page, again, same name, that I'll often cross post between Instagram and Facebook. And then I have a website, drmatthewnagra.com, which we're doing some editing on soon to hopefully make it a little more user-friendly to make your way around, like the blog and the recipes. I've got a few on there. I need to post some more. All my podcasts, I'll link this one there as well. So whenever I have an appearance, I have a tab where I link all those. So I'll do that there. As far as, upcoming projects or resources, one resource is, I would say, Simon's book, The Proof is in the Plants. I actually helped out with that. My name's in there. There's a gratitude section at the end. So we're going back and forth almost daily. I think we still do that for forever now. And I reviewed a lot of the health claims in there, helped them edit some of those. And so yeah, I'm pretty proud of it as far as what I've seen. I haven't read the environmental or ethical portions yet. I know that comes afterwards, but just in advance, he was sending me the health stuff. So I really do think it's an excellent resource. He also has the meal plan that's out now, 2-week meal plan. So plantproof.com/meal plan. And I don't know if I got anything else for you right now.
Cool. Well, I mean, you have enough on your Instagram page for people to just soak in all of the goodness. All right. So I teach people about living a holistic life. And I think that means so many different things to so many different people. So I want to ask you, Dr. Nagra, what is living a holistic life? What does that mean to you?
It means, considering more than just one aspect of health, right? There's obviously nutrition, there's physical activity, there's mental health, which isn't always a priority, I find, for a lot of people, myself included. I sometimes sacrifice that to try to do other things, but it's about really considering all those factors. And if you've nailed your nutrition down, kind of how I talk about moving from breakfast to lunch to dinner, if you've nailed the nutrition side, keep at it, work on some of the other aspects that you can also try to improve on, and take a break every now and then. I'm personally really kind of taking this week and part of next week off, because I was working for I don't know how many weeks straight really without a day off, and so sometimes you need that as well.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Really, really appreciate your time, all of your golden nuggets that you have shared with us in terms of just living better every day. I love your tips on taking things one at a time and mastering one at a time and basically creating atomic habits. I really love those tips. So thank you so much. You are so appreciated. We cannot wait to all follow you and stay in touch, and we will see you soon.
Thanks. See you soon too.